So I'm going to call the work session for the Sierra Vista City Council open for 20 October 2020. We have everyone here except Ms. Pacheco, who I'm sure will be arriving shortly. First item on the agenda is 2A, the October 22nd council meeting. And after the call to order on Thursday and the roll call, we have the invocation and pledge as usual. And then we have acceptance of the agenda. Is there any comments, corrections, questions on the agenda?
No.
Okay, it's pretty short. Yeah. Mr. City Manager's report comes next. Chuck, have you got anything that you want to highlight today on?
Probably have some news on CCOM, but not waiting for it to be official. So.
Okay. All right, something to look forward to. A little teaser there from the City Manager. Consent agenda. Item 2.1 is the regular City Council meeting minutes of October 8th, 2020. Any corrections, additions, subtractions, clarifications, discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to 2.2, the substitution of documents for the Holiday Phase 5 subdivision plat. Any questions? Discussion? Okay. Well, we're zipping right along. It's going to be a hopefully quick meeting. Public hearing item is the next. We have the public hearing item on the adoption of the development fee schedule that corresponds with the land use assumptions and infrastructure improvement plans in accordance with ARS 9-463 and city code, etc. And Mr. Felix, you gonna enlighten us on this again?
Yes, Mayor, members of council, here we go. Step 3 of the 4-step process in updating and development fees. You've already done the land use assumption public hearings, 30-day comment, vote. Now comes the actual fees. And this Thursday, you're just having a public hearing. It will be a 30-day vote, or a 30-day window.
Public comment period.
Public comment, and then in December, you'll actually vote on them. As we discussed, here's the summary of the infrastructure improvement plan based off the housing build out and what's expected to happen over the next 10 years. Mayor, you did note that you noticed the park development fee still looks negative at the end of the period. Teaser coming to you all. The revenues over expenditures so far in the general fund for fiscal year 20 look good enough. We might be able to recommend to you that we transfer some excess revenues over to the Park Development Fee Fund in 20, as well as the budgeted 2021 transfer to help that fund out. More news to come. Again, just a review of the actual build out that was expected over the next 10 years. This will be revised probably in 2024 again. And then here's
let me ask you a question about it,
Sure.
David, if you come back on that
Sure.
slide. I know 2024 is the next time we look at the fees and the structure of the fees, right?
Correct.
That's what you mean. And the question really is, if there is a disparity in between that now and then that is a great disparity, either negative or positive impact on this, we have the ability to go in and take action at that time to correct, adapt, whatever it may be.
Mayor, members of council, yes. The resolution says you must do it within a certain amount of time frame, no more than 5 years, but that doesn't prevent you, if you wanted to really enjoy this so much, you want to do it every other year, there's nothing to
But
prevent
again,
us from doing it every other
that
year.
requires we go through this whole consultant process.
Yeah, this whole.
And it has additional costs associated with it.
Correct. The
Okay.
study is a
Got
side
it.
issue. Just to let you know, the ordinance does allow us, and I checked with Tischler Bice, the law has not changed. We can index these fees up each year by the construction cost index with a 30-day notice.
Okay.
Increase cannot exceed 5%, and we cannot change any of the assumptions, adding extra things in
And
there.
we can decrease it as well?
Well,
If it
we could
goes
have,
down?
if there's a negative construction cost index, we could decrease
If
that
that
as
ever
well.
happens, yeah.
But if we were to have, say, a large growth in housing, we'd have to do a complete study, because you cannot change this table right here without a public hearing.
Got it.
Here's the proposed new fees, 100%. As again, this resolution will come to you. The following resolution or a subsequent one will have you resetting the construction sales tax from 2.45% down to the 1.95% that the standard retail is at. This saves a lot of headaches, a lot of additional reporting and getting the money transferred from the general fund to the individual funds. This is a recommendation to make it easier all the way around and easier to track. This also gets rid of the legal requirement that excess does go over. So it just kind of cleans things up more easily now. And also with the changes in laws, this just makes it more streamlined and much more efficient to do it this way. As you can see, if we had had the original 2006 going forward at the construction cost index, the current rates would have been over $7,000. Our proposed fees at 100% are $5,400. And the current fees at 100% would be $4,100. There is some additional sales tax, though. There's a savings in sales tax on the houses, which of course depend on the value of the house, would have a pretty big swing on which way is easier for you to go.
And that's the other question I had for you, David. Based on new houses, is the $325,000 house, is that high, low, in the middle?
Based off when we started this, that was the average fee for a new house
The
at that
house.
time, yes.
Okay, got it.
It's still the average.
Well, I didn't know whether we were higher or lower, but I was hoping
That's-
it was average
That's average?
for new houses.
For new home
In
builds.
Sierra
New
Vista.
construction
Single
home in Sierra
family.
Vista.
Yeah. What a shock. What a
Constructions
shocker.
are-
Well, they're
they're-
not being built, that's why.
Construction costs are higher
Yeah,
right now.
big time.
And so to review the timeline, you've already had the public hearing, you've approved the infrastructure improvement plan and the land use assumptions. This will be the hearing on the proposed fees. We'll take 30-day public comment. On December 10th, you'll vote on the fees, vote on the proposed tax rate decrease, and then the fees and new tax rate will go in together at the same time on March 1st.
Questions for Mr. Felix? Yes, sir.
Are they taking into account, one of my concerns is rising housing prices when we add a development fee to it, even if it's new construction, because I raised new construction by 15% in the price, I'm gonna turn around and those local neighborhoods are gonna raise also, and so would a rent when the housing market rises. Are we looking into that when we establish the development fees, or when we want to use development fees?
Mayor, Councilmember Benning, good question. The market sets the price for a house. Back in 2006, 2008, the houses across the street went up over $50,000 in price in 6 months, and we did not change a single fee or other item. So if the housing market says that $325,000 is the market price for a new house, then that's what it's set at, and that's what that developer can sell it at, regardless of our costs or the cost of wood. Because as I mentioned in the last one, I don't know if you remember, the construction cost index has gone up over 5% since we've started this study because of the growth in housing nationwide and the costs associated with the housing nationwide. Their material costs have gone up quite a bit too.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Final comments, Mr. Felix?
That's it. We'll see
Thank
you
you, sir.
Thursday and one
And
more time.
I'll just mention that this is, again, we'll get the briefing, we'll open it up for the public comment. And that's all we'll do on, there's no vote, obviously, on Thursday. Okay, thank you. The rest of the things we got on that meeting are called the public comments and requests of council, and of course adjournment. So if there's no other questions, we'll go to item B, the Fry traffic light discussion. And that
Mr.
is-
Mayor, while Sharon's getting
Sharon.
that set up, I'd like to just introduce this
Okay.
real quickly. So what we're doing here today is sharing with council a progress report at the 35% design, and that means we're about 35% of the way to the design being completed. So we're sharing some estimates, which staff are still working through on the budget for the project. And we're still refining a lot of those numbers with the consultant. And so then we have some information on traffic signals on Fry Boulevard as council requested at the last council work session, and some of the data that we're considering regarding the need for those signals. So, and finally then we have some visuals for you in conjunction with the data on the traffic signals on what crosswalks would look like with the new design. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon. Take it away.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, seems like it's been a while. Good to see you all again. Start first of all, just let you know what we're currently looking at on the cost. Victoria introduced where we're at in the project, and we thought it was important to show you where the numbers are coming in right now compared to what we have budgeted for the project. So a variety of categories are broken out here. I apologize for the formatting errors. Sometimes when you convert this stuff, it doesn't end up looking the way you put it together. But the bottom line is our total construction estimate right now for the first segment of the roadway from North Garden to Carmichael is $3.452 million. What we have in the budget right now for fiscal year 21 is $2.5 million. Don't be too alarmed by the spread on those two numbers, because you may recall I talked with you in June about an update to the IGA. And the MPO had some additional funding available, and we were able to get that money through a revision to the IGA, but it was too late to include that in the city's new fiscal year budget for 2021. So those numbers will be updated in fiscal year 2022. So we did put the adjusted budget in there for fiscal year 2022, so you can see the difference. We closed the gap considerably between what we're currently looking at on the 35% estimate and the adjusted budget for fiscal year 2022. Now, I will note this is inclusive of both design and construction. So the design work we currently have underway is coming out of this number as well.
And this is Fry Boulevard from North Garden to
Carmichael.
Carmichael.
Yeah.
That's a big chunk.
All right, and just breaking out that.
Sharon, just
Yeah.
real quick, but that also includes the money for the planning for the entire project, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If you said that, sorry, I just missed it. So.
All right, since we're here to talk about traffic signal today, I'm breaking out the traffic signal numbers in a little more detail. So you can see how that number from the previous sheet, there we go, on the traffic signal and street lighting, 1.245 million, breaks out down into the individual components. So each of the traffic signals run about 330,000. Our RFB is rectangular rapid flashing beacon. I'll get into that in more detail later and what that looks like, but it's associated with a crosswalk. Pedestrian lights, street lights, electrical service, and then the wiring and all that stuff to make it work. Okay, getting into the signal warrants, I will let you know this is where things in this presentation start to get a little techie. There's not a lot of good ways to talk about this without getting a little techie. If there's any questions, just let me know. But what we're looking for in this is just consensus and guidance from council on how we should proceed with the traffic signals on this corridor. But when we talk about traffic signals and where we put them versus where we do not, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices lays out a series of signal warrants for us. There's actually 8 of them, but many of them have subparts, so it ends up being more like about 16 of them that we run to check to see if a traffic signal may be warranted at an intersection. And that goes to point number 1, the meeting of a warrant or even multiple warrants does not in itself justify the installation of a traffic signal. There's a whole bunch of different factors which have to be considered.
Could you use another word for warrant? What does that mean?
Criteria.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, how many
Criteria.
warrants, or how many do they have to meet to
They-
qualify?
They only technically have to meet one, but meeting a warrant doesn't in and of itself justify the installation of a signal. It's just if they don't meet any warrants, then you really want to take a hard look on whether signal control is the best solution for that intersection. There may be some type of less restrictive control that is more appropriate.
And a good example of that would be the old Coronado Golf Links and Busby intersections. Those used to have two-way stops on them. There started being accidents and warrants were starting to be met. One case we put, we ended up with four-way stops at both of them. One actually didn't meet the warrants but had problems, and then the other one did. So, but we didn't have the money to do the signals, so we ended up with four-way stops. So that was the treatment, in lieu of the traffic signals.
Sharon, I have a quick question. I'm sorry, this goes back to the previous
No problem.
when it says $330,000, is that to install or is that what it costs us every year to maintain?
Good question. That is to install a brand new traffic signal.
So the fact that we already have the signals at those areas, so that's not the cost
These
of
would
maintenance.
Correct. These would be for new signals at those areas because we are pulling in the roadway. The existing signals are designed for a 5-lane roadway on Fry Boulevard. Because we are pulling in the roadway, the signal poles really need to come in with it and be sized for the roadway.
Got it.
Part of the reason for that is pedestrians. There are specific standards for how far away that push button they use to cross the roadway needs to be from the roadway itself and the extension of the crosswalk lines. So if we don't move the signal poles, then we have to add supplemental pedestrian push buttons, which means we need more wiring, which means we need more conduit. We may have to rewire the signal. Conduit may not be big enough, and we get into a host of other questions that we have to address with that.
Thank you.
And that's one of my concerns, and thanks for bringing it up, because I didn't want to really get into the discussion of this in detail. But my concern is, we know whether we have warrants or not on the North Garden interchange, we have to be able to regulate traffic in and out of the poles should that operate as a main gate, even though it's unlikely and would only be for a short period. What I don't understand, and it's going to have to be explained to me probably in detail, is what you just said, Sharon. I know lights are programmable, and I understand that we have a certain distance from the push button on the we're going to have another 15, 14 feet between the push button on the pole to where we actually start the pedestrian into the street. Okay? And what I don't understand is the way things are programmed these days, why there can't be a program delay. We're basically going to need the same number of lamps on the street in that particular intersection. The other one, you probably get rid of one of the traffic lamps. But I don't understand why we would dig up for, even though I imagine 330,000 is cheap. Why we would?
It's not cheap.
Yeah, but why we would dig up those particular signals if we could find a better way to adapt or reprogram, because they're probably the lights on those intersections, both of them are old enough that they're probably going to have to be replaced. I got that.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can do that by reprogramming and save some money, that's where I'm looking for. And I also understand there's an aesthetic to it, because you want the street to look a certain way, and sometimes the old stuff is not the fancy new sexy stuff, or you want the fancy new sexy stuff. I get that.
I'm not sure traffic signals ever meet that standard.
Yeah, the other
Thank
point,
you for thinking so.
Might.
the other point I wanted to make is, it's been my experience, and I may be wrong. I haven't been doing this as in depth as you have, and as Matt has. But when we talk about traffic warrants in the past, that has helped us decide whether or not we need a new signal rather than retain an old signal. And I'm very reticent about giving up any traffic control devices that we've already paid for and are established. And I would much rather do a reprogramming or upgrading or whatever than putting in new signals. So that's my 2 cents.
I just want to point out one other thing with regards to traffic regulation and control. Obviously, you know, we have a 5-lane configuration. I think the speed limit there is 35, I think, Chief. I doubt if any of your officers would tell me people are going 35 through there. So, you know, we're envisioning a narrower roadway at 25 miles an hour, which in and of itself is a traffic control, as well as pedestrian crossings, which should help slow down traffic as well with the median and that kind of thing. So, you know, there's other factors that go into traffic control besides just signals.
And that's a good point, Chuck. Safety's got to be paramount.
And, you know, the other thing, you know, too, at, you know, 45 miles an hour or whatever, at that time when those signals were put in, which may have even been before the bypass, that was a main
It was before the
drag
bypass.
through town, and much higher speed and much more traffic than is currently being carried by West Fry Boulevard right now.
And I think we got William then Gwen.
No, Chuck actually answered my question, Mr. Mayor.
I was
Thank you.
just curious, I think I missed it in the conversation. Are the poles reusable?
Councilwoman Calhoun, they are, but the arms that come off of the poles are set for the roadway distance.
What you were
so,
talking about with
Yeah.
reprogrammable?
Yeah, and I mean,
They're not reprogrammable.
the signal, and I'll get back to the mayor's points, and I think I'll cover your question in that as well. You know, the mayor brought up some good points, both about the aesthetics and the age of the signals. They are some of the oldest signals in town. Those are important considerations for us. In terms of reprogramming the signal to allow extra time for pedestrians to make their way from the pole,
Okay, that's what you're talking about.
that
Okay.
would theoretically be possible. However, I am not sure that it would meet access board standards. Those standards are updated on I don't want to say continual basis, but regular basis. And what they currently require is if you take the crosswalk and extend it off the roadway, they require the pole with the push button on it to be located 5 feet either side of the extended crosswalk lines. In addition, they require the pedestrian push button pole to be located no further than 10 feet from the curb line. So I don't know that programming would solve that issue.
I see.
We would need additional push button poles to put them closer to the actual crossing point, and then we get into the other issues, which I had talked about.
And there's been no change or upgrading or fancifying of those push button things?
No, they're not that exciting.
Nothing cute you can put in there?
They're basic traffic signal components. There's nothing decorative, awe-inspiring about this signal.
Are we talking in any way to maybe go along with Gwen's question of possibly adding, if we are going to make this a pedestrian area, of adding it in for the blind where it's the cheap when it hits?
I'm not sure I understand.
You talk about, it has to be, if it's new construction.
So it has to have
meet
the cheap.
ADA standards.
But do you know what I
whatever those
mean?
are.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I missed it initially.
Chirping.
The chirping, I guess, is a better. I use
Oh.
cheap. I guess
Oh,
chirp
okay.
is a better term.
Okay.
That is something that
That
we can
bird noise.
incorporate into the signals. It's not actually required to have that feature. The reason the one near the transit center has that feature is we do have more visually impaired
people on the
who
bus.
use that intersection due to the proximity from the transit center. But that is something that can be incorporated.
Is that what you were asking?
William?
Those RRFB peg crossing signals, those are the things when a pedestrian crossing, they turn flash and then turn red and then back to orange, or no?
It's a simplified version of that.
Okay.
And I'll have a picture
Okay.
later on.
Sweet.
Didn't mean to take you off track there.
That's okay.
Sorry. Since we got on them.
I think I can get back. So covered bullet number 1. bullet number 2, very common misconception. Traffic signals may or may not improve efficiency or safety. It depends on the intersection specifics. Some people don't realize that actually installing a traffic signal, the number of accidents can actually go up. The characteristics of the accidents change, but the chief will tell you that there's a lot more rear-end collisions at a traffic signal than non-traffic signals. Of the 3 signals studied along this corridor, Fry Carmichael is the closest to meeting a warrant right now. And I'm going to show you what that looks like on the warrant analysis. One thing we always want to keep in mind is the proximity of future growth areas. We certainly don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by removing a signal which isn't warranted today, but may be warranted a year, even 5 years from now. But along with that, I would say nothing is set in stone forever. If something highly unexpected were to happen and an intersection now warrants a traffic signal, putting one back in will cost about $330,000. So nothing is forever. It is completely reversible. And then last point, simultaneous signal operation can create additional challenges which should be considered. What does that look like? Well, it turns out simultaneous signal operation is in use on 2 different signals on this corridor. Yeah. Christine is obviously well familiar. So North Garden and Fry and BST and Fry run simultaneously. That means the signals will always change at the same time. Those 2 intersections are a bit of a headache. I cannot even tell you how many phone calls I get on those 2 intersections. And a big part of the problem is eastbound, westbound is the main movement at Fry North Garden, and northbound, southbound is the main movement at BST. So we've got to find an answer that doesn't entirely meet this one, doesn't entirely meet this one. It's somewhere in the middle and works not great for either. But that's the solution, because we cannot run them non-simultaneously because they're too close together. If we took them out of simultaneous operation, you would have the chance of backing one traffic signal into the next, which is not something you want to do. As it turns out, Fry North and Carmichael Fry also run simultaneous operation. So we have some of the same issues there, not identical, because at least on those, eastbound, westbound is the predominant movement for both of them. But if you make a left turn off of Carmichael, you're going to get stopped at North because the traffic is also, or the signal is also for southbound left turners there.
And I'm glad we're thinking about these things.
Well, like I said, I can't tell you how many calls I get on BST, and people will say, well, the light turned red and there was no one on the side streets. I said, yes, but there was. If you look down to North Garden, there was a vehicle waiting there, and that's why the light changed. And it's, again, not saying it works great, but it works the way it has to, given our constraints. So going a little bit into the signal warrants, here's where you can actually see how they work. Now, I noticed as I was getting ready for this presentation that the top of the right graph got cut off a little bit. So I'm going to see if they can switch me over to this real quick. All right. Okay. So what each of these bars is here, these each represent a different hour of the day. You can see the times down at the bottom. The taller bars are the Main Street traffic movement. The smaller, darker ones along the bottom here are the minor streets. So because this is Fry and North Garden, these are Fry up here, and these are North Garden down here. To meet this warrant, 8 of these taller bars have to be above this line right here. They don't have to be 8 consecutive hours. They can be, different hours throughout the day, AM peak, PM peak. But they do have to be the same hours. These bars here are located above this line. So you can see currently at Fry and North Garden, it doesn't meet warrants for any of the 8 hours for this particular traffic signal warrant. In order for it to do that, 8 of these would have to be above that top line. So you see, we are quite a ways away from that. We do have a few peeking over the bottom line here, but there is not 8 of them that correspond with 8 hours above the top line. And I wanted to note too, I've pulled just 2 of the traffic signal warrants because really, when I looked at each of these intersections, all of them were only close on meeting 2. So I pulled the 2 that it was closest to. So this is one warrant, and you see it doesn't meet any of them for Fry North Garden. Now I can switch back to the presentation.
I'm glad you explained that because I was so confused this weekend. I didn't know. All of this was very confusing to me at
I
first.
just can't imagine.
All right.
I'm sorry, just because
Yes.
no one else. What if we just didn't have a light at like Fry and North Garden? Like we had a 4-way stop. Or
We're
something.
gonna get into that discussion.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You're good.
But yeah, you're ahead of us, but it's coming.
So the first warrant I showed you is what's called the 8-hour warrant. The second one that each of these intersections came somewhat close to meeting was what's called the 4-hour warrant. That's on the left. In order for it to meet the 4-hour warrant, you would need to see at least 4 of those plus signs on the other side of the curve. So they are a ways away from that curve. They're not really very close at all. So this signal does not meet any warrants currently. It actually doesn't achieve any points in any of the warrants. As I noted before, the simultaneous operation with BST and Fry is a challenge for us. And then in order to meet warrants in the future, because I talked about planning for the future and what that could look like, both Fry and North Garden would need to see significant traffic increases, as much as double in some of the hours, in order for this location to meet any of the warrants. All right, we'll move on to ones that get a little more interesting. Fry and North is up next. As I noted, this signal runs simultaneously with Fry and Carmichael. It receives points on 2 separate warrants, but doesn't meet either. In order to meet warrants in the future, North would have to see a traffic volume increase about 10% in 3 different midday hours. So if you look at the graph on the right and compare it to what I showed you before for North Garden, you can see that we have hours on both the major street and the minor street that are above their respective lines. The hours where both are above their respective line are delineated by those little black triangles. That means it meets the warrants during those hours. So it currently meets 5 out of the 8 that it would need to meet to satisfy this warrant. So it doesn't meet the warrant overall, but it's closer. Also, if you look at the 4-hour warrant off to the left, you have 2 of the plus signs that are on the right top of the curve. 2 more would need to shift that direction. How do you get there? More traffic volume, which I noted, about a 10% increase is what we would need. Part of the issue with Fry and North, however, is the area to the north is pretty much completely developed at this point in time. There's not a lot of new development potential there. So when we look at it being 10% short right now, I'm not sure where 10% more volume would come from on North, given that the area is entirely developed.
Well, the only additional draw would be finishing development of the park that's on the far north end of North.
Yeah. And how much that would draw, if it could, kick 3 separate hours over, I don't know on that.
And for that to happen, this is on a daily basis rather than once a month, or, we might get that kind of volume if there's a big event going on,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be daily, is that?
Yeah, that's a good point. The traffic signal warrants are run on one day, but they're supposed to be run on a standard day. So not the Christmas parade, not the 4th of July. We don't run traffic signal warrants on a weekend because traffic patterns look too much different than a weekday.
So this was a one-day, this is a one-day sample, I see.
A business day, yeah.
Standard business day. All right, moving to Fry and
Well, you
Carmichael.
have a question?
Just curiosity, I can ask later.
Okay?
I do, and I'm sorry if you explained it already. Why is the sum required lower on that intersection?
Very good question, why that top bar is lower. It gets into the manual on uniform traffic control devices, and it gets into the number of approach lanes on the intersection. Since North Garden is where we transition back to meet up with BST, the approach lanes are different, and therefore that bar goes up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
That makes sense.
very good question. Okay, Fry and Carmichael. As noted several times, runs in simultaneous operation with Fry North. Like Fry North, it receives points on 2 separate warrants. It doesn't meet either. However, it's just a little bit closer. On the 8-hour warrants, there are now 6 of those triangles. It meets 6 hours. It would need 2 more to satisfy that warrant. And it's very close, as is. When you look at the hours it didn't meet, it's less than 10% away. And then looking at the 4-hour volume, 2 plus signs with circles are over the graph, and you see 2 more that are pretty much right on the line currently that could, with a few extra cars, could shift over to the other side, and the 4-hour warrant could be satisfied. When we look at this signal, we do see further to the south, looking along the Wilcox area, the potential for future development in that area. There is undeveloped property in the existing condition. So unlike North, which is almost entirely developed, this area is not. So is it conceivable that we could get additional traffic through this intersection on both the main street and the side street? It is possible. So if there's any of the signals that we would recommend to council to consider keeping, this would be the one.
Well, and let me ask you a question about that. When I think of east-west travel and north-south travel, I know you got the data here, but to me, those 2 intersections are tied together. And in my way of thinking, if Carmichael's that close to meeting warrants, then they both should be considered, rather than one and not the other. Am I out to lunch here?
You talking Fry North and Fry Carmichael, Ms. May?
I'm talking about Carmichael and North.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a good point, and certainly worth considering. It's something I kind of mulled over in my head. Keep in mind, at Carmichael, that's the transition area right now, so that's where it would go up to 5. By the time you get to North, it's down to 3, so it looks a lot different. If you're making a left-hand turn, if you're a pedestrian, it looks much different crossing 3 lanes than it does crossing 5. Also, I do think that the simultaneous operation creates some issues, and that we could effectively operate Fry and North with no signal while having a signal at Fry and Carmichael.
Well,
That's just my...
Yeah, I'm just concerned about left-hand turning movements from north onto Carmichael. That would be my concern in that configuration.
Yeah, and that would be my concern as well. The left-turning movements, in addition to pedestrians, are always the biggest concern. And PD would say that's the biggest concern as well, because that's where your injury accidents usually are. They're not on your rear-end accidents. Yep. They're on those turning movements.
The other thing, and I'll shut up here and let everybody else talk here in a minute, but the other thing, I think you hit on a key point, is this is phased so that east of Carmichael, you're still going to have 5 lanes, and there's a transition there as well. So, the question I ask is, we've taken that into consideration, and the Carmichael signal may not be complete until we do phase 2, which would get it further down.
We have taken that into consideration, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And just a point of clarification, I realize I misspoke earlier. I've been sitting here thinking about it while talking. When Councilmember Gray asked if the design cost included the whole section of the roadway, it actually is, right now, we are only working on the active design from North Garden to Carmichael-ish, the terminus of the project. We master planned the whole thing, but we are only at, when we looked at doing the 35, we are only doing that segment which we intend to construct right now.
So the planning costs are only for Fry North Garden to Carmichael?
In the master plan.
Yes.
The master plan is at what percent?
Yeah, the master.
5%?
No, the master plan that we did was, I think, like 15% or something. That looked at the entire roadway, but the actual design and construction that we're working on right now, that only covers the North Garden to Carmichael.
Okay, so there will be additional design cost with each phase?
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
so thank
Sorry,
you
I
for
missed
clarifying that, because, okay.
William, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions, looking at everything in a bigger picture. When was these warrants pulled? And are we looking at the goal of increased traffic, foot traffic, which they have to get there somewhere or the other, foot traffic in that area, increase of traffic just to get them there? So are we forecasting numbers of how much these 800 per hour vehicles would actually increase with the design phase being completed? If we're saying we want to bring people to the West End, we have to get to the West End somehow if we don't live there, which means traffic. So when we pull a warrant, if we're pulling a warrant last week, that warrant's going to be totally different than pulling a warrant 2 weeks ago based on what's going on in Service to begin with. So if we pull a warrant today, it's going to be different than the design phase is finished and we're bringing people to that area. So we taking that into an account when we're making recommendations of we need a light, don't need a light.
Okay, let me try to wrap that. Let me try to wrap that up. To answer the first question, when were these numbers pulled? The date was November 15th, 2018, is when these traffic numbers, because we have gotten the question, well, do these reflect COVID and people saying home more due to COVID? No, this was pre-COVID. When running traffic signal warrants, we can only run them on the existing condition. It's really hard to speculate on the build out, what that's going to look like in terms of where people are gonna come from, where they're gonna park, and what that's going to look like. So all we can do is run it on the existing condition, and that's why I put notes in there on how close they are to meeting the warrants, so you can kind of balance that in your mind as you're considering the signals, and keep that as part of the thought process.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've already started talking about crosswalks a little bit.
That's what I thought too. But
No, these are the existing. These are the existing, yes. Yeah, and 2040 didn't change things much, so. On the crosswalk visuals, so when we talk about signals, one of the things that ends up being, people see as being very important in accommodating on this corridor is pedestrians. We want this area to be aesthetic. We want it to be walkable. What does that look like? And if we don't have the signals, how do we accommodate pedestrians? So this is, you might recognize this. This is from the schematic design. Just a very early snapshot from the consultant on what could this corridor look like. Pretty much right in the middle there, you see a mid-block crossing. What a mid-block crossing is, it's not at a major street intersection. So you see some features there that I'd like to highlight. One, you have some curb bump outs, which reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians. Have those bright white lines to help delineate the crossing area. You also have a median that goes through there that provides a refuge for pedestrians, so when they're crossing the roadway, they don't have to do it all at once. They can do it in stages. All those end up being really important features of a mid-block crossing especially if you have higher traffic volumes, ways you can help pedestrians get across the roadway without a full-blown traffic signal. I would also point out that there is an intersection off to the right side of this. You see the more traditional crosswalk there, and you won't be able to see it on here, but they have some beacons there as well, and I'll show you what that looks like. So this snapshot actually comes from the 35% plan. So you can see how things have moved along a little bit. And this is actually the Fry and Carmichael intersection without a signal. So some of the features, we have I think we decided on a stamped asphalt surfacing for the crosswalks that just provides provide the sound when you drive over it, not an overly distracting sound for the driver, but let you know that you're crossing over a crosswalk and to be alert. It also, we added after this, we added white lines on either side, so you don't just have that stamped asphalt, you also have the more traditional white lines that people are used to. But this is directly from the 35% plans of what the intersection would look like without a signal. And then, because we've been having these discussions with the consultants and nothing is set in stone yet, the mid-block crossings have been an ongoing item of discussion for the last couple weeks. Here's what a mid-block crossing looks like in another area. And in fact, this is very close to what we're currently working on with the consultant. You see the median there in the center that provides a refuge for the pedestrians so they can do the crossing in 2 stages. You'll also notice actually within that median there's an offset. So the person cannot go directly across. They have to take a little bit of time. It gives drivers a little more of an opportunity to see that pedestrian, make sure they're not hidden behind any poles, vegetation. Just gives the driver and the pedestrian a little bit more of an opportunity to see each other. You also see in here the RRFBs, the Rapid Rectangular Flashing Beacons. This is what they look like. They're pedestrian activated, so you press the button and basically it gets that beacon going back and forth. It is not a red light like the other signals that I think you were mentioning. Those are what's called HAWKs. And I don't actually remember the full acronym on those. It's kind of weird. But these are a lower level than the HAWKs. They don't have a red light, but they do provide notice to the driver that there is a pedestrian who is crossing there and to be alert. And those lights only flash when the button is activated.
And they're solar.
So showing an example of a
Yeah, these are
4-lane
solar.
crossing.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and this, as Victoria noted, this is a 4-lane crossing, 5 if you include the center median area.
So we don't get all those trees, huh?
No,
That was
sorry, the trees
obviously
don't come
taken
with
in
it.
the south somewhere.
Oh, that's it, yeah, that's
Yeah.
Oh, they're drought resistant.
Washington DC.
Can I go back one slide? You said this was the basic 35%, okay. When I look at the right side of that, we just talked about how that's the transition point back to the 5 lanes. So, what I'm gonna say here, from the crosswalk that's on the east side there on the right, we transition back to 5 lanes, and we do have contingency plans, because it may be a year, 2 years before we're able to extend the rest of the road to the east. So this isn't accurately showing the transition from the 3 to the 5 lanes again.
It is, because the 5-lane is just off this picture. It's at the match line on the right side.
So that's the
It's
transition.
actually at Denman.
Okay, it's a Denman,
Yeah.
okay, well, that makes
Yeah.
sense then. The other.
Canyon,
Canyon.
Canyon, sorry.
Yeah, Canyon,
Where that urgent care center is.
yeah, Canyon. And I guess I'll wait and look at more detailed drawings. We know, of course, that Carmichael is still 4 lanes going south and 4 lanes going north. and there's one of those, there's probably a turn lane, and I'm not sure how we're dealing with signals on getting that left turn lane from Carmichael onto, the new 3 lanes to the west. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, what that would have to look like, just, off the cuff, is the 2 lanes coming off of Carmichael, one would be a right turn lane, one would be a left turn lane.
And I'm just gonna say this, I don't see how we would do that on a normal day basis without a light there. That's my 2 cents.
You'll see.
You'll see, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
you'll see, Mayor.
So,
Make me
excuse me.
smart, Chuck.
What?
Either one, you can go.
Okay,
You guys get ahead of us.
On that same note, as Mr. Mayor, looking at Carmichael and being 4, and I think it's 5 right at the turn, because you have the 2 turning, maybe,
I think it's 5
I think
too.
it's 5.
Yeah, no.
Are we 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now thinking of narrowing Carmichael, or no?
We don't have any plans to
Okay.
narrow
Because
Carmichael currently.
I'd hate to invest now in Fry, and then 5 years from now, we have to tear up something because we want Carmichael to be match or be similar, so.
Well, I think the only
just
place that
taking all
Carmichael
that-
has that middle lane is
The middle.
at the extreme north end.
Roger,
Yeah,
yes,
it
sir.
is.
So I think we're okay. But again, I'm just concerned about the transition period. I'd like to see what the ideas are on that. Ma'am.
thank you. I see Carmichael would have the 2 crosswalks, as in the second picture, the black and white one. Is that those 2 rickrack ones? That's the crosswalks at the light, or at that corner, rather.
Yes.
Right? So is this crossing in the center, is it still there too? That's not taking away from the center one, the one that's just
the
in.
mid-block crossing?
Mid-block, yeah.
Yeah, no, the
It's a
mid-block
They're all
crossings
there.
would be in addition to any special treatments at the intersections.
So then on the other side of the mid-walk is north?
North is just off the left side of the page that I have up right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can't see north on this one. The drawing you
And
were
it's
looking
over
at,
here.
the color drawing,
And that's
this one,
conceptual, that's
this is
conceptual.
conceptual. This is not,
This is
there's,
35%. So they've gone from this one to this one.
So this is not Fry, this is just a possibility.
Fry, it could be
Oh, I see
any
what you're-
road USA.
It could be Main Street,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes,
My street.
That was
And
also
where that
confusing.
dotted line is on the left, north is a little bit beyond that.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, those are what's called match lines, and that helps us tie up the plans one sheet to the next.
And the-
Okay.
Very good, cool. The other thing is, we've talked to business owners and let them know we're not gonna block entrances, and of course, north of Carmichael, you got the motel with the entrance almost where your crosswalk is, so I know it's gonna be we're gonna have to move it a little bit.
Yeah, and that's definitely been an item of discussion, on where the mid-block crossings are located that don't block driveways, that need to be kept, and there are efforts underway by the city's economic development, office to reach out to property owners and discuss driveways with them.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I didn't
I thought you had something.
fix my glasses.
Gwen, anybody else?
Nothing, no, I'm good.
Sarah, you're awful quiet today.
I did see diagonal crosswalks in San Diego, that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
Well, when you have a lot of foot traffic,
Yeah.
that helps.
Just, we're talking about crosswalks,
Calm down.
Those are pretty slick. The issue with those is you have to stop all
All traffic.
traffic movements to let the
Yeah.
pedestrians.
They do that in Tokyo too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
just saying.
All right, so that was the rapid flashing beacons, and that's the end of the presentation. So,
Chuck,
I wanted
comments?
to go from there.
Super,
Okay.
thanks. That was, really
good.
helped, really
Really
helped.
helpful.
So at your last meeting, I mentioned that I needed to take a look, more at these numbers and the concept design and talking with staff. And based on all the information, the Warren information, future potential development, and also the fact that, taking out all the signals would leave a stretch between 7th and
The gate.
Buffalo Soldier Trail without a signal. My recommendation to the council will be to continue to have a signal at Carmichael. I think it's important to have a signal there, and I think that would take care of some of the crosswalk issues you guys were just discussing and that kind of thing, and have that landmark there that, one, is gonna slow down traffic, two, kind of create a gateway into the West End area to the west of Carmichael. The signals at North and North Garden have been under discussion with staff for years and years, not just with this project, but for a long, long time. And, you know, clearly there wasn't really much we could do with North. I know there's been discussions with previous councils, even in years past, about taking out the one at Garden, because it's just simply not needed, and Sharon's gone over some of the other issues associated with it as well. So that one certainly I would recommend taking out, and I believe we could probably not have the one at North as well. So the consequence of all that, you know, and given the fact that there's gonna be medians, there's gonna be a narrowing of the street, there's gonna be a lowering of the speed limit, there's gonna be pedestrian crosswalks in that area, that we can save, you know, according to the estimates, about $660,000 on this project by not having those be fully signalized intersections, which takes us below the budgeted amount that you saw, you know, at the start of the presentation, and gives us a little extra contingency to work with to make sure we get this part of the project done. So that is my recommendation to the council for your consideration. Obviously, you know, we make recommendations based on numbers and all that, but it's up to the council, obviously, to determine what they think is best for the community. So, but that is my recommendation.
Go ahead.
So instead of stoplights, we put three-way, four-way stops at Garden and Fry?
No, you wouldn't need
Well-
them because you would have
Well-
the pedestrian crossings.
Stop signs.
I'm gonna reserve any comments till I actually see a design.
Yeah.
And my concern really is you're coming off North Garden, making the left-hand turning movements are always problematic when we look at these things. So I'd really wanna see what that looks like.
Sharon, we're going up on 75% plans here pretty soon, and of course, we'll give you another update, you know, at the 75% level. Is it still possible to change some of the traffic controls at that level?
Absolutely.
Okay, so,
But I just,
so
you know,
you'll have a much better idea of what this is all gonna look like at the 75% level. And we'll run it, and then obviously you'll still have the option to make changes at that point.
Out of curiosity about the properties on North, that, what used to be the lumberyard and what used to be Shiloh, I think the Shiloh property is a church still.
Yep.
I'm just curious
church.
if that, the possibility of changes to what's being done, particularly the lumberyard. And if somebody went in there with a big project, is it big enough to create a traffic issue at North and Fry?
That's an if.
It's a big
It's-
if,
Yeah.
but,
My impression, based on the size of the property and what I see, would that in and of itself be enough to push it over?
Right.
Based on where North is sitting right now, my feeling is probably not. I'm not sure they would be able to put something big enough on that property with high enough traffic generation to be able to do that.
okay, but and throw in, just for your figuring, both sides of the street becoming something big.
Yeah.
What-
Is there enough? Would it be enough? And I know you guys look at all of that kind of stuff, but just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, and again, you know, highly speculative, but I don't see that either piece of property would be big enough to get over that 10% hump that I talked about.
Okay, thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First I want to say, as far as Fry and Carmichael, I definitely think we should keep that light there. I'm not pro traffic lights, but like I think that is necessary. For Fry and North, I have no strong feelings either way, honestly. But for Fry and Garden, as somebody who owns a business near that area, I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say I probably go through that intersection many, many, many more times than most other people. And I watched that intersection. Chief Thrasher, please close your ears for a second. I have never seen so many people blow that light as blow that light. If we're talking about safety,
Yeah.
I sit there and I'm like, dang. And they just go, and I think it's because they're not looking at that light. I think they're looking at BST. And they're blowing it, and I'm like, whew, thank goodness there's no traffic there.
And when you sit there, it does take a little while to be able to make the left-hand
And
turn.
it does. And even like I always come in when I make the left, I always come in off BST and I make that left off of Garden onto Fry. And sometimes I'm just like doop 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 doop. So I no, for real, like I'm not no, that's what it is. And I don't know if maybe it just needs to be a flashing.
Well, and that's,
Yellow
and
or
hopefully
something,
it's
but-
75, we'll be able to get more, a little more detail on the traffic signals and the turning movements. But again, I'm concerned with the left turn there too, especially if
Yeah, I
you're
am
on a
too.
light.
I'm more concerned with people blowing
Well, yeah.
that they do now.
I'm gonna go back real quick, Ms. May, to the warrants, because I have the same concern as Gwen has, not with something big going there, but currently, 80% of the businesses down there are closed. The shops are empty. If we fill those businesses up,
Not
Those-
if, when.
those warrants are changing. And that's what worries me on saying, let's eliminate a light, let's not eliminate a light. At Carmichael, the other ones I'm fine with, in North I'm little, so.
Well, and that's why when we talk about these, the one that we are currently recommending is Fry and Carmichael. There are, as you noted, a lot of businesses closed there, and then there's also future development potential immediately available on that roadway.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sharon.
Anything else, guys? Good briefing, Sharon. Thank you very much. We'll be looking forward to the 75%, I'm sure, and some more good discussion. We now move to item C, report on recent trips, meetings, and future meetings. Crickets, okay.
I am curious about the commissions, how they're doing as far as if they're getting filled, if people,
Joe, can we get a comment on the commissions?
At this point in time, most of the commissions that I have had any contact with have carried over members, and they're still with a quorum, using the 5 number. Some of them still have 5. We recently got a couple of appointments, so Chuck's doing his first appointments now. But the terms carried over from regulatory to non-regulatory, and so the terms don't end until the end of the year, so they're starting to come up for renewal, so the questions are being asked. But there are several of them. Cody has been meeting, Arts and Humanities has been meeting, so meetings are happening. People are still participating, and we have a vacancy list on the website like we always have.
Okay.
thank you.
On that same, the diversity culture diversity, we had four or five applicants in.
I do not know
Huh?
that for sure, but
I don't know.
I thought there was.
Well, you need
I'll
to
go
check.
back and double
You need to
check.
Okay. All right.
Other thing along those lines, and I'm glad you brought it up, Gwen, we need to start making sure we put the status in the executive
Oh,
reports.
Yeah.
that would-
And Victoria was taking a note even as I was thinking about that, so we'll start doing that.
Okay. Future discussion items for our council requests? I think we just had one, but that's okay.
Okay, I'm gonna follow up on that. Remember the gentleman that came and talked about the train station and Benson? And where I am with that now, I'm trying to find out if Benson has made any comments or resolutions related to, do you remember what it was about? Not a train station, but a regular train stop, trying to get Amtrak to recognize this is an area that they want clients to be able to ride the train to Benson. And I just want to comment on that too. That one of the guys said something about if it works, Sierra Vista would be included on like whatever you call it when it tells you where the train is going to stop, the schedule. Certain communities would be included on their itinerary.
The connectors would be listed, so example, if Greyhound stops in Benson before they come
Oh.
here, there would be a connection to Sierra Vista.
Okay.
That's how it would
Okay,
be listed.
that's how, okay. So anyway, I think it's worth us at least checking up, furthering on. Christine had brought up an issue, whether it was a private company or a government.
Common carrier.
Subsidized, yeah.
Carrier.
So I've asked that question too, and I'll hopefully get back to you with that.
Great.
But hopefully I would like us to just get it done.
Okay. Future discussion items, council request, Victoria, have you got anything on your list?
Mr. Mayor, I'm hoping to have the court agreement on in November. We're still working out
yeah.
some details with that, of course. And then in December, we're planning a work session on the tribute-specific plan updates and then the payment plan for the repayment of the sewer interceptor debt for tribute.
Request, can we put the youth commission on a work session agenda at some
We
point?
can, but I would think to structure that properly, you and I probably need to get our heads together before that.
Okay, we can do that.
And at least come up with a couple proposals that we can try to convince these other guys to come along with us.
They better be good.
No pressure.
Okay, so youth commission, I need to write that one down.
I just need to put it back on my radar.
Yeah, I
Add
know
to
it's
the
been off
list,
mine
you
too. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Chuck, you want to give us an update of the city status on COVID? The city government status on COVID?
City government status. Well, as you're probably aware, the county has had an uptick in cases here recently. Most of the cases have been occurring in the Douglas area. I think the chief has the exact numbers, but we have seen a slight uptick in our zip codes as well. So we're not out of the woods yet by any means. As a result, for our facilities, we're going to continue to maintain the current posture that we have at least through the end of the year, and then evaluate whether we can go with further reopenings. Most of the staff is back at work, and we still have some people working from home, and that will continue in the future as that works out for people. But right now, I'm not seeing us really changing too much in terms of our facilities until January.
And I just want to jump in on that with the bump up in cases. Before I came to you guys and asked for the mask ordinance, asked for the authority to do the mask requirement, I looked at a number of things, and there were three critical things that I looked at. And I looked at them yesterday, and I look at them periodically. But I've looked at them a little more in earnest since the numbers are blowing up in Douglas. And one of the things I look at is the R naught factor, which if it's one or more, it means it's going up. If it's less than one, we're going the right direction. And the R naught factor, after taking a downturn, a little dip up, and now it's going back up again. So it's like 1.4, I think, is the last time I saw it. So it's going the wrong direction. That's a state number. Okay, we can't get that number locally, which I wish we could, and that would certainly help the decision process. The other thing I do is I look at the actual numbers, and at least two times a week, sometimes 3 times a week, the actual number of new cases, and we have taken a local uptick in the cases. And I look at the 3 primary zip codes for us are the older part of the city, the 635, 650, even though that's got a good chunk of the county in it, and of course the post. So I look at those numbers, and they are at what I would call a tolerable level, a little higher, but a tolerable level. The other thing that's critical for me as I talk to Mr. Gomes at the hospital, and the key thing is availability of beds and personnel to treat should we have to push. And that is not a concern of his right now, okay? So I don't see a need today, and it could change tomorrow or the next day when we get numbers, to reinstate the mask requirement. However, I would ask you to be aware of this, that this is going on, and if you have strong feelings one way or the other, I would certainly appreciate your advice. There's some other things going on too that you need to be aware of. I've looked at a number of other things to include the fact that in Cochise County, Our biggest groups are the 20 to 40 that have had this, and the over 65 is the next group, as you may imagine. So we need to continue to be vigilant. We need to continue to encourage people to wear their masks, wash their hands properly, social distancing, the common thing that we do. The other issue is, of course, I will let you guys know before I would make any decision to reinstate the mask ordinance. Chuck, there was one more thing, but go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just mention one more thing about the numbers. Even though we have seen a slight uptick, I think there is something encouraging here, and you hate to talk about death rates and encouraging at the same time, but the number of deaths in Cochise County has actually remained stable throughout all this period, and which tells me that they're getting much better at treating the disease. So even though we may see an uptick in cases, people are recovering, and that's good news. So.
Well, the other thing that concerns me is people can't be complacent. We hear good news like there may be a vaccine available at the end of November. We don't know that that's going to be a fact. You have to understand that even if it is available, November is going to take some time to distribute it, and 100 million doses, if that is actually comes to fruition, is going to take some time, and it's going to be prioritized to first responders, medical personnel, and those people over 65 that have other conditions. Now, whether that uses the whole 100 million or not, I don't know. But obviously, it's going to take a couple of months to come up with the other 100 million to help us out. So it's still going to be even when we have the vaccine, it's still going to be a very serious issue. And we can't be relaxed or complacent. We still need to be on guard. We still need to evaluate what we're doing, where we're going, who we're seeing, and continue to wear masks and follow CDC guidelines to help curb the spread. So we're not out of the woods yet, but there may be some folks out there that think, hey, it's coming. It's right around the corner, and hopefully it is. But even if it's around the corner, it's going to take a couple of months to get things properly distributed. So we have to remain on guard. And I think that's probably all I want to say on that, Chuck. Okay? Thanks, everybody, and see you Thursday. Meeting's adjourned.